I still remember the sound of that lock, cold, final, a click that cut deeper than any words ever could. "Dad, you're useless now," Ethan said. His voice didn't tremble. It was calm, almost rehearsed. Then the door closed and I stood outside. My own house. The evening wind brushed against my grey hair. The porch light flickered like it didn't want to see me either. I could hear laughter from inside, Ethan's, his wife Claire's, and the echo of a life that no longer belonged to me. I was 68. My knees weren't what they used to be, but my memory still was. And that night, as I stood there with nothing but the clothes on my back and the papers in my hand, every moment from the last 5 years replayed like a cruel movie. Ethan was always my pride. Dark brown hair, sharp jawline, the same green eyes as his mother. Smart, ambitious, the kind of son every father prays for. Until money started whispering in his ear louder than love ever did. After his mother passed, I signed most of the family business over to him. I thought I was teaching him responsibility. He thought I was giving up my crown. It began with small things, fewer calls, shorter visits. Then came Claire with her picture-perfect smile and her quiet, polished cruelty. She had a way of talking that made every sentence sound like advice, but feel like a verdict. She told him I was becoming a burden, that I should relax and let the young ones handle things. So I did. I retired, moved into the guest room, watched my office slowly turn into a nursery, watched my decisions slowly stop mattering. Until one morning Ethan asked me for my last set of keys, said he wanted to make new ones for security reasons. I handed them over without a word. That was 3 days ago. Tonight he locked the door behind me, and I realized those keys weren't for security. They were for exile. The air outside smelled of rain and regret. I looked at the papers in my hand, my last signature still drying at the bottom. My lawyer had begged me to reconsider, but I didn't. Not after what I'd heard Claire say the night before. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. She told Ethan, once he's gone, everything's ours. Just make sure he doesn't come back. Her words sliced through the silence like glass. And Ethan, he didn't even argue. He just nodded. So yes, I had signed one last document, but not the one they expected. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Every sound echoed. Every step felt like a goodbye. I didn't go to a hotel or a friend's place. No, I went to my lawyer's office, the one that stayed open late for people like me, people who'd been betrayed by blood. The rain started as a drizzle, then poured heavier. By the time I reached his door, my coat was soaked through, but my mind was clear. "Mr. Anderson," my lawyer said, startled. "It's late." "I know," I replied, laying the signed document on his desk. "I just need you to deliver this tomorrow morning. No calls. No questions, just deliver it." He hesitated. "Are you sure about this? Once it's filed, there's no going back." I looked at my trembling hands, the same ones that built a company from nothing, held a newborn son, buried a wife, and now we're ready to let go. "I've never been more sure," I said. He nodded and sealed the envelope. The sound of that seal closing felt like justice being born. I left the office, rain hitting my face like small reminders that I was still alive. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. Just one line. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Dad." I smiled. If only he knew. The next morning, Ethan woke up to find the gates of our company locked, not against me, but against him. And that was just the beginning, because the document I signed wasn't a resignation. It was a transfer, and the new owner wasn't Ethan. It was someone he never thought would side with me, but that's a story for tomorrow. For now, I'll let him enjoy his victory, just for 30 more minutes. The morning after felt different. The air outside their mansion was quiet, almost staged, the kind of silence that comes before thunder. From what I later heard, Ethan woke up late, wrapped in that comfortable arrogance only power can give. He poured his coffee, scrolled through his phone, and smiled at the messages from the board congratulating him on his official takeover. He had no idea the celebration would last less than half an hour. At 9:02 a.m., his phone rang. It was my lawyer, Mr. Andrews. Ethan didn't answer. At 9:07, he called again. Still nothing. By 9:15, Ethan's secretary walked into his office, pale and trembling. "Sir, the system locked me out," she said. "I can't access any company accounts." Ethan laughed. Then call it tea. It's probably a glitch. But when the head of IT arrived, he wasn't laughing. Sir, the company's ownership just changed. All admin rights have been transferred? To who? Ethan asked. The man hesitated. To your mother's charity foundation, the one your father created 25 years ago. Ethan's hand froze on the coffee mug. The dark liquid spilled down his wrist, but he didn't feel it. He stood there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like someone trying to wake up inside a nightmare that felt too real. Claire walked in moments later, her blonde hair perfectly tied, wearing that same ivory blouse she'd chosen for their victory day. She looked at Ethan, confused. What's wrong? He tossed the printed document onto the desk. Her smile vanished. Impossible, she said, flipping through the pages. Her eyes darted from line to line until they landed on the signature at the bottom. My signature filed, verified, irrevocable. The foundation, the Grace Anderson Fund, named after Ethan's mother, now held every asset of the Anderson Group, and the fund's controlling trustee was me. Claire's voice broke. He tricked us. Ethan slammed his fist against the desk. No, he can't. He wouldn't. But I had, because that's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break trust. It teaches precision. I was sitting in a small cafe across the street from the company building when I got the first call from Mr. Andrews. It's done, he said. Filed, approved, sealed. I thanked him quietly and ended the call. Outside, the morning sun hit the tall glass windows of the Anderson Group. Ethan's name had just been removed from the executive listing. It reflected my face, lined with years and mistakes, but for the first time in a long while, I saw peace there. I didn't hate my son. I hated what greed had made of him. But I wasn't done yet, because I knew Ethan. He wouldn't give up with one defeat. He'd fight back hard. By noon, I was proven right. My phone buzzed relentlessly, 55 missed calls. All from Ethan, each one angrier than the last. When I finally answered, his voice came through shaking with fury and fear. Dad, what the hell did you do? I stayed silent for a moment, letting the sound of his breathing fill the line. Then I said softly, I gave everything back to where it began, to your mother's name. You can't just take what's mine. I sighed. It was never yours, Ethan, it was ours. You just forgot the meaning of that word. He cursed, shouted something about lawsuits, lawyers, revenge. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. You're not my father anymore. And that was the last thing he said before hanging up. I sat there for a while, listening to the empty tone. Then I looked out the window and saw something that nearly broke me. Across the street, Ethan stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, staring up at the office windows that no longer belonged to him. Beside him was Claire, arguing, pointing fingers, her perfect hair now plastered against her face. He wasn't listening to her anymore. He was staring at me. Even from that distance, I could see the question in his eyes. Why? And if I'm honest, I didn't know how to answer it, because part of me still remembered the boy who used to hold my hand when crossing the street. The boy who cried when his mother died. The boy who once promised me he'd take care of me in old age. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who locked his father out of his own house. That night, I went back to the small apartment I'd rented near the harbor. Simple, quiet, with one chair, one table, and a photo of Grace smiling in the frame. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window. The city lights flickered across the water like 1,000 tiny memories, trying to find their way home. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. You think you've won, old man? You haven't, I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because the truth was the war wasn't about money anymore. It was about soul. And in that battle, I'd already chosen peace. But life has a strange sense of timing. 2 days later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside were photographs, printed, glossy, deliberate. Claire with another man. Different hotels, different dates, all stamped clearly. At the bottom of the pile was a short note, written in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. He deserves to know. A friend. I leaned back, the room spinning slightly. The photos fell across the table like fallen dominoes of truth. So that's how fate wanted to end this chapter. Not with revenge, but revelation. Ethan thought he'd lost everything because of me. He was about to learn he'd been losing far more, long before I ever signed that document. I folded the photos back into the envelope, locked them in my drawer, and whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, son. You'll see what real loss feels like." Morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, cutting thin lines of gold across my small apartment. I sat there still holding that envelope, the one filled with proof that would shatter Ethan's last illusion. It wasn't revenge that kept me awake that night. It was sadness, the kind that sits heavy on your chest and whispers, "This didn't have to happen." I'd lost my wife to illness. Now I was watching my son lose himself to greed and lies. And I couldn't decide which death hurt more. But I knew one thing. Truth has a way of finding its moment. And that moment had arrived. I called Ethan that afternoon. For the first time in weeks, he picked up. His voice was rough, tired, stripped of the confidence that used to fill every word. "What do you want?" he muttered. "I want to see you," I said quietly. "Just once." No lawyers, no shouting, just you and me. There was silence. Then a heavy sigh. "Fine, same place. The old house. 1 hour. The old house." He still called it that, the same home where he'd locked me out. Maybe some part of him still remembered it as home too. When I arrived, the gate was half open. The yard looked unkempt, grass too tall, flowers wilted. The place looked like it had aged overnight. Or maybe I was just seeing it differently now. Ethan was sitting on the porch steps wearing a wrinkled shirt, eyes red from sleepless nights. He looked nothing like the sharp young man who once boasted about running empires. He looked like a boy again, lost and cornered. He didn't stand when he saw me, just stared. "Came to see the damage you caused?" I shook my head. "No, son. I came to show you something." I handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, his fingers trembling slightly. One by one he pulled out the photos. His face changed with each one. At first confusion, then disbelief. Then a deep, wordless kind of pain that hit harder than any scream could. He looked up at me, eyes wide and broken. "Where did you get these?" "They were sent to me," I said softly, "by someone who thought you deserved the truth." He threw the photos on the porch, ran his hands through his hair and let out a choked laugh. "She said she loved me. She said she was with me for the future we were building." I sat down beside him. "People like her don't build, Ethan, they collect. And when the collection's complete, they move on." He didn't answer. He just stared out at the yard, at the empty swing where he used to play when he was little, when life was still simple and love was still enough. "I thought I was protecting us," he said finally, voice breaking. "I thought if I took control you'd finally see I could handle it, that I wasn't just your shadow." I looked at him, really looked at him. Under all the anger, I saw the same boy who used to run to me after every scraped knee. The same boy who once believed I could fix anything. "Son," I said quietly, "you never had to prove yourself to me. You already were everything I wanted you to be. You just forgot who you were trying to impress." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. For a moment we sat in silence, 2 generations of mistakes side by side on a cracked wooden porch. Then his phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. And again. Finally he looked at the screen. It was Claire, he answered on speaker. Her voice came through sharp and panicked. "Ethan, listen. I'm leaving town for a while. Things are getting messy with the board. Don't call me." Claire, but she'd already hung up. He dropped the phone, head falling into his hands. "I lost everything," he whispered. "Her, the company." "My name, you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, son. You lost what was never real. What's left now? That's what matters." For the first time in years, he didn't pull away. He just sat there silent, letting the weight of truth settle. Hours passed like minutes. The sun began to set, washing the house in orange light, the same color Grace loved. I could almost feel her there, watching from that same window she used to water her plants by. Before leaving, I stood and looked down at him. "There's still a way to fix things," I said. He looked up, defeated. "How?" "Start by forgiving yourself. Then maybe one day you'll understand why I had to do what I did." I walked to the gate. Behind me, I heard him call out. Just one word. "Dad!" I turned. He was standing there, tears finally falling freely, the kind he'd been holding back for years. "I'm sorry," I nodded. No words. Just a small nod that said everything words couldn't. That night I returned to my apartment. The harbor was quiet again. I poured myself another glass of whiskey and opened my old leather journal. Inside I wrote 3 lines, not for anyone else to read, just for me. He locked me out, but I found peace outside the walls. Money blinded him, but truth opened his eyes. And in the end, forgiveness was the only key that mattered. The next morning I received a letter, this time from Ethan, handwritten, no lawyers, no business talk. Just a son writing to his father. Dad, I've decided to restart the foundation. For Mom, for you, for everyone we failed to help. If you'll let me, I'd like to work under you. Learn again, not as your heir, but as your son, Ethan. I stared at that letter for a long time. The words were shaky, uncertain, but they were honest. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not the kind of smile that hides pain, but one that feels earned. Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what really matters. And sometimes locking someone out gives them just enough space to find the door that leads back home. I folded the letter, placed it beside Grace's photo, and whispered, "You were right, love. He just needed time." The sun rose higher, bathing the water in gold, and for the first time in a long, long while, I felt like a father again,